I now call to order the meeting of the directors of the Atlantic Yards Community Development Corporation for Tuesday, October 17th, 2017. I'd like to note for the record that this meeting is being webcast. The directors have received the relevant written materials in advance of today's meeting and are free to ask questions at any time. Consistent with the policy of our parent corporation, we welcome public comment on the items on the following agenda. After each item is presented and any comments are received from the directors, we will allow members of the public to provide comments. All comments should be limited to 2 minutes and should only address the item that is under consideration. You will note that the final item on our agenda today is titled Public Comments. At that time, we will have an opportunity for members of the public to provide comments on non-agenda related matters. I also want to note that we have to sort of be mindful for ending at 5 p.m. today. I believe there's another meeting in this space. So before we begin, I would like to welcome John Hare here, a Senate appointee to the board. Welcome, it's great to have you here. He was appointed to fill the vacancy created by Monsignor Harrington, who recently resigned, and I just want to thank him for his service. I welcome you to the board.
Thank you.
Now I'd like to ask the directors whether anyone has a potential conflict of interest with respect to any of the items on the agenda.
Thank you, Madam.
So I would ask you to please make an appropriate disclosure on the record at this time, and you will then be sure that you can freeze yourself from any discussion or vote. Does anyone?
No scheduling conflict, but I just want to note for the record that
Okay, thank you.
indicate any disinterest in the subject matter of the meeting. I just have it trying.
Thank you so much. Hearing none objections, our first order of business is approval of the minutes from the June 6th. Everyone have time to review those. Can I get approval of, any questions, comments, additions, or deletions? I'll entertain a motion. A second? All in favor? Anyone abstain? Yes, of course. Marion, can you provide us with the president's report at this time?
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Before I get started, I do want to welcome John to the board. We got the opportunity to meet and do the board orientation, so we're grateful that you joined us. Also like to introduce the new Executive Vice President for Real Estate, Holly Like, who joined us about 6 weeks ago. She replaced Joe Chan, and so we're looking forward to her being a good part and a very vital part of this project as well. You all ready? All right. So the President's report, as you know, is not an action item. It's an item where I report to you the many things that have been going on, and then after each chunk of the report, we will take questions on that section. There are really 3 components to this report this time around. The first component, the first component really comes from as a follow-up of our last meeting. There are several items on the last meeting that came out that we addressed to you, some of it in writing, some of it we'll discuss today, and then there were other requests of the directors directly to Toby during the process of setting the agenda that we will also raise. What I'll be doing is discussing the AY project public commitments that are in the MEC, the GPP, and part of the June 2014 agreement. ESD Board of Directors AY-related votes since inception, which is around January 2015. Mitigation Monitoring Contract, HDR contract, where we came before the directors at our last meeting asking for a 1-year extension. I want to update you on that. There'll be a community relations update brought to you by Toby, and then we'll do the last component, which is the construction activity project update from the developer. At the June 6, 2017 AYCDC meeting, there were several things that we discussed: the Times Plaza redesign, open space signage, block 1129, construction fence. Those items will be discussed and addressed during the developer's presentation. As you know, one of the things that you asked was that we'd have a larger component of the Times Plaza redesign so that you can have a better perspective of where that is. Affordable housing was a question that came up. Where where is the affordable housing lottery, where is the tenant occupancy, and that portion. We'll discuss that as well during the developers' presentations. As some of you may remember, there was an email that went out on the units that are now on the open market. The open market pretty much is where the developer is going out looking for additional people who would be eligible for the affordable units when they go in the open market. And again, the developer will go over that. When they go in the open market, it just means that they have broadened or expanded their reach. The AMIs do not change, but just expands the reach. Also, at the last meeting, we discussed the supplemental environmental impact statement. One of the things that was discussed was how do we include greater community input and participation, and that's something that we wanted to talk about. An email went out from Toby right after the meeting discussing what the process is. We think there may be ways for us to include 1 or 2 additional community meetings as part of that process. I think there are 3 things we can do in the interim. 1, if you have concerns of what that could look like, please go ahead and we can discuss that one-on-one. Toby and I would be more than happy to meet with individual directors. 2, you may send us emails that we will simply response to everyone. And then 3, just understand that we can do this at the next AY meeting. I say all of those to get to this point. At this current time, there has been no decision made, no formal process has been proposed to us, nothing has been accepted, nothing has been approved. Therefore, there is nothing to talk about from an EIS standpoint. However, in terms of public process, if there wants to be other ways to engage, we can have that conversation. Just understand, right now we have time to do that. And we just wanted everyone to be aware that although we may not have a program, we can discuss process. The AY project public commitments, there were a number of public commitments listed in the GPP, the MEC, and as part of the June 2014 agreement that incorporate regular updates on the status of these commitments as they come online. What we have done today is really, I'm going to go over some of the commitments. As you know, the MEC is a 28-page document with several things from washing down the truck tires to the school. What we want to do is really highlight the items that are directly related to community impact and that are active or about to become active, and highlight those at these meetings to update you on where things are so that you, as you're working in the community and are hearing from the community, you can know exactly what's going on, specifically these 4 items today. The affordable housing, I'm starting with the school, I'm sorry. The school that is going to be a part of B15 is a 100,000 square foot school. It's a district-wide middle school. The construction is currently stalled due to site access negotiations with the neighboring buildings. So right now the building is not under construction. Having said that, once that building becomes under construction, the process is not within AYCDC. The process is between the developer and School Construction Authority and the City Department of Education. We put that mitigation in there and was part of the negotiations, so that's how it comes about, but that process will be going through the construction process with SCA. Second thing is the affordable housing. Currently, as part of the agreement from the beginning, there were 2,250 units of affordable housing must be built. In the June 2014 agreement, we accelerated the construction of those buildings to 2025. If those units were not completed, there are liquidated damages. By year's end being this year, 4 residential buildings will have been completed and opened, totaling 1,246 units, of which 786 are affordable, or 63%. Open space. The developer will provide 8 acres of publicly accessible open space. The open space design was presented to you and approved by the ESD directors in 2015. The conservancy responsible for the management of the open space has been established. Parts of the open space around 535 Carlton Avenue, or B14, have been completed, and sections around 550 Vanderbilt Avenue, B11, will be open in the coming weeks. These are open to the public. There are signage up giving instructions on how long the space will be open each day. Another mitigation, another part of the MEC was parking for the 78th precinct. Originally, the parking was in Atlantic Center, Terminal Mall, and now once 535 Cortland Avenue opens, the garage in B14, those 28 spaces will be available there. Time Plaza redesign, we'll be discussing that as part of the developer agreement. The next portion is ESD Board of Directors AY-related votes. There have been 4 actions taken by the ESD directors. The HDR contract extension, April 2017. The STV contract extension, February 2016. Open space design, August 2015. And the bylaws were amended so that the governor could appoint the head of ESD, be it the president or the chair. That was done in 2015. The current residency rule, the original residency rules call for all directors to be from New York City. The amendment permits the governor to appoint the head of ESD only, and that person does not have a New York City residency requirement. The mitigation monitoring contract that we discussed earlier, or at the March meeting, the board voted to recommend that the ESD board extend HDR's contract for 1 year, with a commitment to come back to the board for an extension or to provide a status update of an RFP for mitigation monitoring. Excuse me a minute. The ESD staff anticipate the need for an extension of HDR's contract for an additional year. Since the March meeting, there have been no updates on the start of construction activity at B15, B13, or B12. There are also no updates on the Site 5 and Site 1. However, there is continued work on the rail yards, infrastructure, and right now at B3. So the need for us to maintain the contract is important. Also, the need for us to come back to you at the beginning of the new calendar year, 2018, to ask for an additional 1-year extension. HDR scope of work is determined by Section O of the MEC, and as we go forward with that 1-year asking that for that 1-year extension, we can discuss how that came about and how we move forward. Yes?
What is the actual expiration date of the HDR contract?
June? April?
May 30th?
May 3rd, the last day of May.
Yeah, the end of May 30th, 2018.
So, in all likelihood, we'll be asking for that extension since there will be ongoing work and there's currently, to move forward without a scope of what the program looks like going forward doesn't make a lot of sense right now. And then finally, the community relations update. I want to welcome to our team on the community relations team, Drew Gabriel. Drew Gabriel joins my team. He was the governor's rep for Brooklyn. He also worked for Councilmember Oliver Capel, Councilmember Lori Cumbo. He's very familiar with the project. He brings a number of years in government. And so we're glad to have him on the team. He'll be working closely and in concert with Toby. Basically, the only change you're going to see is when you get the 2-week look ahead. You never know if it's coming from Toby anyhow. It'll be coming from Drew. All your concerns from the community will go directly to Drew, and Drew will be ones who will be addressing those items. And so before we go into the community report by Toby, do y'all want to discuss anything I raised earlier?
Thanks, Marion. I wasn't clear on the HDR extension. So we're actually extending 2 years from May 30th, 2018?
No.
Just
What
1
we're
year.
asking is, so earlier this year, it was extended 1 year. We'll be coming back at the beginning of 2018,
Right, so
asking for an additional year.
I see.
Because our original request was 2
That was
years.
the vote. So the vote was a 2-year extension?
No, it was a 1-year extension. We requested 2. The compromise was a 1-year extension, and that we would come back for an additional year if needed.
I think part of I remember that vote well because I think I voted against it. I think part of it was to use the stalling construction as a time to revisit that scope of work. So where are we in the ability to revisit that scope of work, comment on the RFP? I know this is something that came up in the quality of life meeting as well. Rather than wait until May 30th of next year, what is the process now for ensuring some public comment on the RFP?
At this time, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to initiate a new contract because we do not know where the project is going to be heading going forward. There are a number of things that this project is going to do. We know what is planned, but going forward, it's very difficult to create a scope of work that's any different than where we are based on the fact we don't know exactly where this project's going to be heading. Namely Site 5 to Site 1, that will definitely shift a lot of what's going on. Second, the MEC was negotiated between ESD and the developers, and Section O really lists what all the scope of work is, and unless there are very specific things, it'd be hard really to reopen a negotiation on something where the scope has already been determined. So I guess my question would be, what scope do you see that's any different than where we are today?
So is a potential compromise to look at Section O of the MEC and get community members and perhaps board members to provide comment on what changes in the scope might be beneficial?
We can do that. The only problem with that is we would have to then issue an RFP, and we're not prepared to do that. I think it would be irresponsible, as I've said before, for us to issue an RFP and not know where the project's going. It would be irresponsible because what are they going to be studying?
I see. So the request for a second extension is, the basis of that is we're uncertain of what the project's
At this present time, correct.
progress is.
Mm-hmm. And what we don't want to do is get to January, February, and if the project restarts, it will still take us the amount of time for us to do an RFP, review it, et cetera, et cetera. So I think the safest way and the wisest way is really to take our time and do it. If you want it, for there to be input, we need to take the time to do that, and we have the time to do that.
So the second extension would be contingent upon a public process in which the scope is reviewed and commented on. Because we would allow for time to revise the RFP. That's my question. I mean, the vote came to us literally, I think, if you go back to the earlier plan, March, April, May. There were 2 months before the contract was nixed. We had absolutely no time to, review it as a board, make comments, bring in the public. This is a 10-year project, which has now become a 20-year project. I mean, I think the way that we're monitoring is perhaps could be looked at again. And so rather than, get to a point where we're renewing just to renew, to not be negligent and absent of monitoring, I'm requesting a process in which the public gets to make comment, we review the RFP, we make comments, and perhaps it's more on process. Just SCIS was more about process than product.
I'm not prepared to agree to that yet, and here's why. The Section O was negotiated, and to make changes within that would require us to renegotiate. I'm not sure that's in our best interest, and I'm just not sure how we would do that. I think we can continue talking about it, and I think the starting point for that conversation is everyone, has Section O. Tell us what that looks like. Tell us what your thoughts are, and let's see if those are good conversations in the right direction, and we have the ability to do that from a legal perspective, from a common sense perspective, from a functional perspective, and then if that's the case, yes, I think that's the right conversation to have. But, some of the things that I've heard thus far in terms of us being able to monitor city agencies, that's not within our governmental scope. So there's a legality there for us. So that's why I'm hesitant. I'm not opposed to having a conversation, but the things I've heard are beyond our governmental authority. And to put that in any document, I'm confident the young lady 2 over from my left would never permit it to go through because it would be illegal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Understood.
Any other questions? She's still there, right?
Nope.
There's no lady 2.
I can hop into that seat if it'll help.
The general counsel would not permit it to go forward. Thank you, everyone, for not laughing.
I thought you were talking about me, actually. I was like, I didn't know how that was power.
So I have another question. Regarding the west portal and the rail yard, I mean, these are public commitments. Can you give us an update on the status of those?
Ashley, do you want to answer that now, in terms of update on the west portal? Or-
I do a whole rail update,
Yeah.
so.
Oh,
You want to wait to that point, Jamie?
sure.
Yeah, okay. Anything else? Any other questions?
If I have a question about construction timing and fencing, that's Ashley too, right?
Well, ask the question, let's see.
So I guess the question is if the timing of construction is going to be delayed for at least a year. I believe that in previous board meetings, we talked about the fact that if there was going to be a significant stall in construction, that the green wall would be coming down, so that residents aren't living with the green wall up for a year when there's no activity happening.
So let me start part of that, and we can finish it during Ashley's presentation. Part of where B13 is used for siding, construction siding for the open space and the completion of where we are. And so that portion of the wall can't come down. The portions of the wall that has been either lowered or removed is really at B14 and B11. And so those two, where 12 and 13 are, those are currently still up. And so I think the developer has not indicated to us that they're going to be needing an additional year. And so as long as they're still working on the rail yard and working on the open space, B13 currently is their siding, where they're doing their siding. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, just a follow-up on Marika's question. I have been informed by community members that directly across with the green fence, directly across the street from the post office, there's been another move in the fence. So it's been moved back behind the sidewalk and it's been lowered to 8 feet. Is there a reasoning for that?
Oh, you know the answer to that?
in the developer will talk about some of the more recent changes to the Black 1129 construction fence, but I would just clarify that
Okay.
no portions of the 16-foot portion of the fence were lowered to 8 feet. It was only moved laterally to the property line. It was not reduced from 16 feet to 8. Good afternoon, everyone. Toby Jaisimi, AYCDC Director. Wanted to take this time to kind of give you an overall community relations update. Since our last directors meeting, there have been 2 quality of life meetings. Just for those who are not familiar, those meetings are held at 55 Hanson Place, which is the Shirley H. Chisholm State Office Building. They start at 6 and go as long up until 8, which we have the room for, but some of our meetings have been a little bit shorter. An overview of some of the issues that were discussed at the last 2 meetings, as Director Stein just referred to. There's some changes to construction fences and MPT plans for the site. Carlton Avenue City Bike Station installation, which actually has gone through. That's at the corner of Carlton Avenue and Dean Street, right in front of the B14 building. The status of infrastructure work and rail yard construction activity has been discussed. B15 site conditions and also neighborhood cleanliness was discussed a lot at the last quality of life meeting, the September 19th meeting. Barclays Center operations and calendar events come up regularly, as we always have a Barclays Center community relations representative present to discuss what's going on there. And then also, as Marion alluded to, portions of his president's report, the open space for 535 Carlton Avenue, B14, and 550 Vanderbilt Avenue, B11, was also discussed. Attendees at the meetings, of course, we have regular engagement from community organizations and residents, and also representatives from elected officials. I do put out invitations to the NYPD and the Department of Transportation, and they were not present at the last quality of life meeting, but I remain to engage with them in any issues that come up that are of community concerns. I follow up with them directly. I stay abreast of what is discussed at the 78 Precinct Council's community meetings. I believe there's one that's actually happening next week, Wednesday, if I remember the date correctly. So continue to remain engaged with the local elected officials. I think with Drew and I working in concert, and both of us having experience working with the local elected officials, we'll be able to maintain an open line of communication with them so that whatever concerns that might not directly be brought to our attention, but are brought directly to the local elected officials or community boards, we can keep a finger on the pulse of what's going on there. Currently, the next quality of life meeting is scheduled for November 14th, again at the Shirley H. Chisholm building, and look forward to kind of seeing residents there and being able to hear their concerns and serve as an opportunity for not just presenting updates on the project, but hearing the things that are affecting their day-to-day quality of life. I do send directors the notes for the meetings, both for the September and the July meetings, were emailed to the directors and also posted on the ESD site. If there are any specific questions about the notes, I'm available and happy to answer them. But in order to kind of keeping up the same process of being able to keep record of everything that's discussed at the meeting and follow up accordingly. Any questions specific?
Yeah, I have a question about the B15 site and sanitation.
Yeah, there was.
It was brought to my attention that there is no entity that's maintaining the site. Has that been resolved?
Yeah, that has been resolved. So at the meeting, what was discussed was there was some concerns with regards to rodents at the site, and also there was some tree pits that were overgrown. Because there is no construction team that's specifically dedicated to the B15 site, I think that's what was discussed in terms of no one's overseeing the site, but the developer has had an agreement with some of their other site staff going out there, making sure that the area is baited. I'll actually make a note that at the meeting, a resident brought up the fact that signage hadn't been posted on the fence that the area was baited, and that signage has since gone up afterwards. And another issue that was brought up with regards to neighborhood cleanliness wasn't specifically regarding B15, but it was with regards to just the pooper scooper law. I smile every time I think about it, because it's just a New Yorker thing. We all have to check our shoes whenever we're walking down the street. The pooper scooper law came up, some businesses not keeping up with their trash disposals and maintaining kind of like a clean environment for the neighborhood. So those were the two specific issues that came up. Any other questions?
Well, I guess just more generally, is there a single issue or two issues or three that seem to be top levels of concern?
I mean, I
Over
think
the last few meetings.
the issues that are listed usually come up regularly. I would say folks talk about the construction fence regularly. We always have a conversation about the green wall, and I definitely appreciate and I understand the community's concerns and requests as it relates to the Block 1129 construction fence, so that comes up regularly. Questions with regards to changes to traffic patterns or like sidewalk access. With the median work that's going on Atlantic Avenue, and also some of the changes to pedestrian access at the corner of Atlantic Avenue and 6th Avenue, that's talked about regularly just because it's a busy intersection. There's a lot going on. Traffic has been changed to only northbound on that intersection, northbound on 6th Avenue, going towards Atlantic. You can tell that I drove, right? So that actually has come up repeatedly at a number of meetings, and also Barclays Center operations. Questions about, making sure that there's appropriate notice about any events that might be happening, protocols for parking or large amount of vehicles and trucks that might be coming to the arena. Those are discussed regularly. Infrastructure work, changes to any impacts to the community, making sure that there's notice that's being sufficiently given. The meetings have like the reoccurring things, but it's also an open opportunity for people in the community to really be able to voice their concerns, whatever is of interest.
Toby, I know a few meetings back we had talked about sort of exploring the idea of having some sort of flyer with information that could be given to new residents moving into the catchment area, so that they sort of knew what to do, who to reach out to if they have concerns. Have we sort of explored that, or? It's
not what do you call it, a flyer? There's an info sheet that has like the ESD team's contact information and also the developers, community liaisons contact information on it, and that's distributed at the quality of life meetings. I believe when we spoke about this a few meetings ago, Marion and I said that we'd make a concerted efforts to kind of work with the new residents in both at Pacific Park and also with the community boards, and making sure that information is dispersed. So what I'll do is I'll add on my list to kind of do a circle through of emailing, be it the tenant association presidents, heads of the community boards again, just so that they know who to reach out to when the community meetings are held and whatever issues or concerns might be brought to their attention, that we're available as a resource to work with them on. So I'll make a note of that.
And if we can also include the private developers who might not, like, who own an apartment building that's
Right, yeah,
through
there
Media's
have been
accounting.
some other
New buildings.
buildings that have opened.
And then I sort of lost track. Where are we with this? What's the timing of the school?
So once B15 construction begins, then we'll have a better timeline. I mean, right now there are negotiations with the neighboring buildings for access to the buildings. So that's the issue on the timeline there.
Are there any other questions related to communications? If not, I'm going to transition it right on back to Marianne to transition.
So we'll ask Ashley and Jane to come forward. They're going to discuss the Times Plaza and discuss where the project is in terms of updates, construction, and everything from there.
Hi everybody, I'm Ashley Cotton with Forest City, representing Greenland Forest City today. I'll introduce Jane Marshall next to talk about Times Plaza. But as usual, we'll just kind of go building by building and touch on some key topics,
Ashley.
a lot of which were already covered by Marion. Okay, so at 38 6th Avenue, there's still interior work ongoing, and move-ins, are expected to begin later in November. As a reminder, there are 67 parking spaces at this lot, underneath this building, that garage is not open yet, but it is going to be run by a company called Park Pro Systems. Also in this building, we are currently working on Methodist fit-out. As we announced to the community, we signed a lease with Methodist and are very excited to have this Brooklyn institution join the Pacific Park community broadly for the health space. And we're working with DBNA, our CBA partner, on that use. The healthcare space is currently under construction. Anticipated opening is fourth quarter of this year, maybe pushing into first quarter 2018. You can probably see, this picture is out of date. The construction bridges, overhead pedestrian bridges are now taken down and there's just fencing around it. That has to stay up there until we get to the next stages of construction, which hopefully will happen next month. I know I keep saying these fences are going to get smaller and smaller, and we're eagerly anticipating that move. So obviously you guys know this is a 100% affordable building. We had almost 90,000 applications for the lottery, and we are slowly but surely working through all those applications with our partner Manny, and then passing them on to city government for approval. And again, move-ins hopefully start next month. So I brought for 535 Carlton a big stack of flyers that you see on the wall here, on the screen here. As I mentioned, this is also a 100% affordable building, and Marianne was explaining that we've gone into what we call open marketing at that building, and we do that heavily in coordination with Manny, our housing partner, and of course, city agencies. And just for those who don't understand the process, basically once you have exhausted all approximately 100,000 people who applied through the lottery and haven't filled every unit, you turn to what's called open marketing. So we are advertising on the internet. We're doing a lot of hand-to-hand combat, sort of getting the word out, which is why I brought these flyers. Actually, we've had really some of our best results with people saying, I heard about it through the Brooklyn Chamber or the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership or whoever, community boards. So I'm bringing these to you guys because you all represent elected officials. I would ask that you ask your rep to help get the word out, or your own networks, etc. And we can email it around as well.
Can I ask a question? So does that mean that with all of the people who applied for the lottery, that you didn't get enough applicants? How are they screened out?
Yeah, so, sorry, I got onto advertising and off of process. So let's call it 100,000 applications. Some people drop out because they're not interested, others drop out because they're not qualified or they don't have the right documentation. I mean, there's a million different reasons, and what the city does is go through that entire log and says, yes, we agree. You and Manny have exhausted the lottery log, and there are still apartments available. In this case, they're all what we call Band 5 apartments. so it's the highest income band, sort of middle income, and therefore we're going to the public, advertising, word of mouth, et cetera, to let people know that these affordable and, importantly, rent stabilized units are available.
So if I hear like a community member, I think several have mentioned to me, I applied for the lottery, but I never heard anything. Does that mean they got screened out?
No one never hears anything, so it's kind of a, I don't know. I obviously don't know everyone's specific case, but if we exhaust the log, so there were clearly not enough people applying in these certain income levels to match the number of units we have, right? Because you take all 300, using round numbers, units and divide them up between band 1 through 5, and then go through one by one with all the rules, disability preferences, community board preferences, et cetera, and do a matching game. Then they need to bring, of course, their tax statements and their employment verification, and extensive documentation to match people. And we know we have exhausted the log and we still have units available.
Thanks.
So never hearing anything would obviously be a disappointment.
Perhaps they were in the wrong band or something like that. They were in a band that was,
Ashley, how do the band 5 income rents compare to the area market? No, I know what they are. I'm saying, how do they compare to a half a mile radius of market rate rents?
I don't have that information just like my fingertips.
But okay, I guess what I'm wondering is, how does this compare to? You guys probably are doing sort of like cost analysis of the general area as everything else is coming online. From my knowledge of the area, I think $2,100 for a studio is probably not that far off from market rate. So I'm also wondering, how much of this is impacted by the fact that the affordable are pretty darn close in band 5 to market rate rents.
I think you're asking a policy question. I don't make the policy. I can give you my opinions about what I think may have happened here. I would say that there is a education process that needs to happen with people who don't think affordable housing applies to them. I've spoken to people and said, no, you're actually in the back brackets, and they're like, no, affordable housing, for them or for someone else or my neighbor or whatever. It's a public policy, program being executed by us that was done by the city, that I think there's an education to make sure we get enough applicants to the lottery to fill these units.
Can I just
Yeah,
clarify,
sure.
but tenants who now come forward as a result of this marketing process still have to meet these qualifications.
Yeah. And everyone's always like, well, sorry, how much and how much do you make? The reason there's a grid, and again, I'll hand it around because it's not easy to see. It depends on if you're a single person or family size and all that kind of stuff. So,
and I'm not saying this is, I'm not by any means saying this is your fault or this project. I think the challenge is, if you're looking for a 1-bedroom and it's $2,600, and you can go 5 blocks down the street and you can get the same unit without having to provide all of this paperwork and go through a 6-month process,
studios
that
to
makes it hard.
461D are more expensive
No,
than this, for sure. And so that's same project, same developer, a block apart. So there's definitely a discount here.
But I think to take it away from the idea of the actual pricing, and Ashley mentioned in her presentation, it's the idea of thinking about long-term affordability and rent stabilization. So even if you go to the market rate unit that is only a couple of $100s either cheaper, or you get more square footage, you know that within a year or two of your lease expiring, it might increase your rent by $500.
Well,
whereas with this process, one has guarantee that because so much thought has been put into the income requirements for it and maintaining affordability in the long term, you're guaranteed to know that you're maintaining affordability for yourself if you know what your income is.
So, I hear you, Toby, that's true for brand new apartments in the area, but for anything that was not basically breaking ground in the past year or two, that's not going to be true. Whether you're a market rate unit or not, if you have 421A, you're going to be rent stabilized. So that's pretty much every new building that has been built in the past
Right, but
5 years.
Your question was with regards to comparing it to market rate units in the area, and one comparing like the market to affordability, it's like long-term versus
No,
short-term.
but I'm saying you're saying you get some sense of stability and security over the long term. I'm saying that sense of security and stability is there in market rate units in the area that might be priced relatively the same. So it's not to say that it's just us thinking about the challenge of these units getting filled, is that they're competing with another pool of units in the area that are going to be priced relatively the same, that don't have maybe necessarily as many barriers to entry. It's going to be difficult, right?
So moving on to the next slide, this is the open space at the back of 535 Carlton that opened last Friday, October 6th. Definitely encourage you to go check it out. Other things about this building that I wanted to make sure I mentioned: City Bike was installed. You guys know that. The leasing is moving forward, and there's lots of tenants living here. And in the garage that's also run by Park Pro, there'll be 24. You said 28. I just want to make 24. Sure. It's 24 parking spots given to the NYPD. We had a great meeting with the police and the parking operator, and we're sorting that out. The garage isn't actually open yet, but it's very close. I also just want to show this photo. This is 535 Carlton looking at the front. And just to give you a sense of how the open space is open on both sides of the building, that's an entrance that's, the sidewalk kind of running up what used to be Pacific Street. We were also asked about rules and signage at the open space, so I wanted to bring this slide. If you go to the next one, Toby, everyone can see it more closely. So these are the rules posted in the open space, and I did want to mention that we are working to establish the conservancy by which we will govern the open space, which in this case is, two small segments behind 535 and 550, but obviously we'll reach out to 8 acres when the project is complete. So I don't think we've talked about the conservancy a lot at this meeting before, so I did just want to mention a little bit about the governance as a reminder to the directors. So we established bylaws for the conservancy that were approved by ESDC, and the way it's governed, there are 8 directors that are appointed by members. The members are the Property Owners Association and the developer. So the developer, of course, in this case is us. The Property Owners Association is built out as we get fee title for every single residential building. So the Property Owners Association today is just one person appointed by the developer, given, these buildings haven't pulled fee title down yet. And so in the interim, while the park is being completed, the developer appoints 7 members and the Property Owners Association appoints 1 member. So the Property Owners Association right now is represented by us, again, because fee title hasn't been pulled down on all these different buildings. And then the developer appoints 7 members. That includes me, some of my colleagues, and so that makes 8 members, so 7 plus 1, right? So 7 by the developer, 1 by the Property Owners Association, which right now is essentially us. And once the project's complete, those 8 will all be appointed by the Property Owners Association. So every single building counts towards that association. Hopefully that made sense. I know I said it a little bit tricky. Okay. Then, in addition, 2 directors active in civic park groups will be appointed by ESDC. Happy to announce that's Marion and Leslie Wright, who is the New York City regional rep for the New York State Parks Department, and she lives in Brooklyn. In addition, 3 ex officio directors who hold the position of chair of the Parks and Recreation Committee for CBs 2, 6, and 8 are appointed. So those people all have those jobs already. That's Shirley McRae at CB2, that's Syra Lanali at CB6, and that is Glinda Andrews at CB8. Finally, 1 non-voting director is appointed by the Parks Department, the City Parks Department, and they appointed Marty Marr, who's the Brooklyn Borough Commissioner. Does anyone have any questions about open space, either rules or conservancy?
Would this be a conservancy like exists for Central Park and Prospect Park that will have its own fundraising ability? And
do the bylaws allow us to raise money? Yeah. Yes. Yeah. But it's also set up so that there's income for the conservancy, so it's not a must.
Okay.
And does the Property Owners Association structure allow for a a renter in one of those buildings could be the appointee,
Yeah,
right?
of course. Yeah, it doesn't advantage or disadvantage any of the buildings. Okay, great.
I'm sorry, before moving
Yeah.
on, Tamara, as you said earlier in the meeting, we do welcome public comment after each agenda item, but it occurs to me that we have one agenda item today. So can I make a motion to pause and allow for public comment? We've actually heard quite a bit of information.
So when Tamara makes that comment, and our attorney can also speak to this, when Tamara makes that comment, what she's saying is action items, and we don't have any action items. So I understand your point, but
That's not how I understood our previous discussions. I thought our previous discussions were after each agenda item, the public was allowed to comment. And in past meetings, I think we have allowed for more comment. We've broken up the agenda in different ways. The agenda today is essentially
okay.
We could make a motion to
Yeah.
adjourn right now for public comment. That would be fine. Seconded.
Just to make sure I understand, that it will be public comment or we'll hop back.
It's not adjourning, right? Sorry, it's, I guess,
public comment on what's been presented.
pausing this item.
So
Are we at a logic breaking point?
So let me that's what I was about to say. I think we can do two things. I think the motion that Jamie's asking for really is for us to go to the president's report, the first portion of the president's report, and have that discussion, and then come back to where the developer is, because to your question, Daniel, actually smack dab in the middle of her presentation. And I know you're pressed for time. So I think that's the conversation. Am I correct, Jim?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, if we don't break, then we've left anyone who wants to make public comments, like, right before the public comment period, and they'll only have 2 minutes. I don't understand that logic.
I think we could move backwards in the agenda, or we can save all the public comments for the end of the agenda. I think those are sort of the two
Right.
options.
So just from a practical standpoint, a motion has been made by Jamie. I believe it was seconded, so I think, Tamara, you would have to carry that.
All in favor of adjourning now for?
Not
It's not
adjourning.
I'm not,
I guess it's
I'm not excited.
moving to the previous item of the
Daniel and I are
agenda.
leaving
How
if it's
about
adjourned. Pause.
We're pausing for public comment on the president's portion of this, right? And the community relations part, just to be clear.
Yes.
All in favor?
Just do a voice vote.
Any opposed? Is that, what was that?
I did not count. I'm sorry. Did you count, Toby?
I did count. There were 3 opposed and there were 6 in favor.
Okay. All right. So, we don't have a list of public comments, Toby.
I can, is there anyone who'd like to make public comment with regards to items that have been discussed on the agenda thus far? I see 2.
Not including.
Just,
I'm sorry.
just to confirm, those 2 comments are with regards to items that were already discussed, because then there'll still be public comment thereafter, and I believe there's the list outside for. Okay. I will shift to that portion of the table. Just because I saw your hand first, I'm going to call up Gib Piccone, and you have 2 minutes.
Oh, okay. Thank you. My comment related to the discussion about the construction fence on Dean Street. Mr. Phillips made the observation that there is staging still going on the B12 and the B13 lots, and so the construction fence needs to be retained where it is. That's not, I'd like to challenge that. That doesn't square with the history of the project. There was extensive staging on Block 1129 for the arena from 2010 to 2012, and at no time was there ever a 16-foot construction fence there. The reason the 16-foot construction fence is there is not because of staging. It's because of the anticipation of high-rise buildings being constructed there and the noise from that construction being detrimental to the residents who live across the street. We know that the developer now has no plan and no projected date to resume that construction, and so hence the 16-foot construction fence is not required. Staging has been possible with the chain link fence at that site. So I would respectfully like the directors to reconsider that as a justification for keeping the 16-foot fence in place. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Peter Crashes from the Dean Street Block Association.
Hi. Yeah, actually, I appreciate. I think it is logical to break at the. It's logical to break at the president after the president's report. A couple things just to piggyback on what Mr. Piccone said about the construction fence. Actually, Marion, what you said is that there's construction staging occurring in the B13 site, which is exactly the area where the fence has been moved back and lowered. So, and to Toby's point that the fence was not lowered, to my recollection, it was lowered just recently in the last month, and and I just confirmed had an opportunity to confirm with the Block Association president, it was indeed lowered and moved 25% of the fence. And when this happened on the day of the quality of life meeting, and we asked the state representative and we asked the developers representative if they were aware, and they were both unaware. So I think that really goes to the notion that if this is a mitigation for noise, that belies the I don't think it makes any sense, and this causes extreme disruption on Dean Street. Noise is actually caused by the fence, not lessened by it. In terms of and I think I have 4 minutes because I'm here from two organizations. In terms of the, I'm just going to take
that's a lot I've never heard ever presented to us.
I think I've done this enough, and I think last time I was told that. So the RFP for the environmental monitor, I just cannot underline enough, and this is, I think it sounds like, I don't know if you were in the room, Ms. Fine, but I think you need to, I hope, appreciate that as we move forward with this project, in whatever form, the monitoring is, we understand it to a certain extent. I think we understand how the ESD processes work, and I think you need to understand, I think that conversation needs to occur where you understand what we understand. We may be wrong, but we think we get it, and we don't like it. And so I think you need to talk to us and learn, because ultimately this project is not, the benefit and purpose and use of this project, the principal benefit, purpose, and use is to eliminate blight, designated blight. And that is not occurring. In fact, because of construction impacts, because of failure to pick up garbage around the B15 site, because of other things, we're seeing a reversal in development development progress in this whole area, and that's occurred. The project's supposed to be done by now. We're about a quarter done. So I think that moving forward, there needs to be a new paradigm. I'm not optimistic about it, but if there isn't, then you guys need to be aware of what we understand. And going to the B15 site, just a few updates on that. That condition around the B15 site, which is a school site, occurred all summer with rats, garbage, weeds. It was repaired. A large hole in the sidewalk on Pacific Street was repaired about a week or two before the quality of life meeting. 2 weeks after the quality of life meeting, we sent photos of rat holes and garbage and weeds to the developer in the state, and then they were cleaned up. But that's a whole summer's worth of process. And this is, I think, what we were told basically is we don't have a maintenance plan for this area. And I think if you go back and you look at the affidavit that Mr. Stanek submitted to the court to have the people who lived in that site not even so long ago, maybe 2014, 2015, you'll see that he said, we need these people to move because we need to get going on the school. And that school isn't started. The location of the construction's access agreement has moved from one project neighbor to another project neighbor. So there's the credibility of the state, honestly, which is key for this project to proceed, is deeply undermined.
Thank you, Mr. Crashes. Your 4 minutes are up.
Okay.
There is additional time for public comment later.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Are there any additional public comment at this point? Nope.
Yeah, sorry. Toby's my slide.
Oh.
Poor Toby's got a lot of jobs.
All right, I'm
Are we back to
Yeah, back to
Ashley?
you.
We're back to Ash.
Okay, so one question that I think, and thank you, Ashley, because I know I think I was the one that requested this last time. So I think, I don't know how this works, but I think I'd like for us to think about the size and locations of the signage. Like the advertisement for 550 Vanderbilt runs and spans the entire block. People know, like, come buy a condo in this unit, and these are relatively small signs on huge green walls, and this is like the public space, and this is part of the community benefit of the project. So I just want us to think about how we're advertising and inviting people in, because I don't think we want to set up a way where you've got to be like right up on it to know that it exists.
Marika, do you mean the need for signage notifying people of the park should be larger?
Yeah.
Do you also mean that the rules and regulations should be larger, or is that a separate issue?
I mean, I think the rules and regs is probably fine, because once you get there, you find out what's happening. But I think the signage of that
And
there is a
announcing the park.
space and announcing the park should be bigger and probably prevalent throughout the neighborhood. I think there's a lot of people in the area, I'm not that far from it, who still don't know that it exists, that it's public, and that you're allowed to access it.
So you want me to
What's the-
advertise around the neighborhood that it's open?
Wayfinding signage to, so that people can actually, are announcing the park.
What is the size of the signs? I mean, I thought they were quite large.
Really large.
Okay.
But I mean, they're
Where do they?
Where else do
Where
you
are
want them
they?
to be put?
no, I mean,
They're
so
all over the
I
green
think
fence
we're
at the
saying
open space.
they're really large in the sense of like they're maybe 3/4 the size of the door, but also keep in mind that the sign saying like "come get a condo" is bigger than the length
I'm
of this
sorry,
room.
I don't know why that's relevant. You know what I mean?
But-
Like, we're allowed to sell condos.
No.
It's our building, and we put
I-
signs in the windows.
I absolutely agree with that, but I
I just
think
think that you keep making that point that, like,
I
as
think
if
that-
we've done something.
no, it's
wrong.
not something wrong. I think the question is if it's important, which it is for you all to advertise condos and for people to come buy and purchase condos, which is critical for the project. I think we also want to think about how we're advertising the public space and that people are welcome and allowed and invited into the public space. And so we want to think about we don't want to set up where the sign saying the public space is something that you have to see and experience from literally on the same sidewalk or on the same street. We want also the signage for the public space to be something that is visually accessible and that you would be like I know that there's a condo there from driving on Atlantic when I'm not right next to it. I don't know that there's a public space when I'm walking across the street. That's what I'm saying.
So on the next slide, we're going to talk about the fence. So this is a picture showing where it's basically the B13 site. And Peter is correct that when he asked me about the fence being pushed back to allow for more of the sidewalk, which was a huge relief to a lot of us, and for the parking to be reinstated, I did not know before an evening meeting, the quality of life meeting. So I apologize for that. Things don't usually get by me like that, but I have investigated it and understand that, you know, if a new says that it got reduced in size from 16 to 8, I have the exact opposite accounting from the people who did the work and from my own inspection of our cameras. You know, we have cameras showing the site that show that it was just pushed back. So I'd love to kind of get your firsthand account to make sure I'm not wrong. But I also understand that it was just an 8-foot fence pushed back. If I'm wrong, I'd like to understand how I'm wrong. So this was pushed back, and there was a sliding gate installed because we have moved more of our rail yard construction team onto this site. The Plaza and Tishman trailers aren't really needed as much for the 535 and 550, but we do have a need for a number of employees that work on the rail yard to be relocated out of the Atlantic Terminal to this location because we no longer own that mall. In addition, the CLO will be located there, and a sign will go up, just like back in the old days when it was on Block 1129, explaining quite clearly this is where the CLO is for on-site community complaints, job inquiries, affordable housing inquiries, as we've had since the beginning of the project. So the security gate has been installed so that the construction team can get in and out of, this sort of trailer park. A security guard will be posted there to prevent unauthorized access. And frankly, there were conversations between all of us about this potentially happening. I am sorry I didn't get to notice it to you guys in advance. I'll try to do better. But practicality told us, let's just move it back and restore parking and the sidewalk. As has been discussed already, there is not noise mitigation happening at this site. And so that's why it's sort of 8 feet already. We've sort of debated that at length as it relates to the post office, et cetera. I'm happy to talk more about it if you want to. I don't have a picture of B15, but I do also want to say that the situation there was not acceptable. It has been fixed. It will be fixed on an ongoing basis instead of a one-time basis. And I appreciate, the state making sure it's on our attention. Obviously, I'm out on the site all the time. Roberta, who couldn't be here today, is obviously walking the site on a regular basis to make sure it does not slip up again, because it shouldn't be like that.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I'm just a little confused. Is this a current?
That's yesterday.
Okay, so it has now been pushed back.
Yeah, it happened the day of the quality of life meeting, and what Peter was referring to is that when he asked me about it, I said, I actually don't know what you're talking about. So now I'm explaining to Peter and to all of you what happened there.
So the fence that's in the middle of the street in this photo is now pushed back to the side?
No, this is yesterday's photo. That is pushed back. At B12, it's not pushed back yet, which is the thing everyone's been asking about. Can't we get the rest of it pushed back?
So where those orange cones are currently, previously the fence there was at the street, and it was pushed back to the property line. So now there's parking available and also access to that site.
Ashley?
Yeah.
Will you be making arrangements, coordination with City DOT to restripe the roadway so that
It's all been restriped.
This is the current striping?
Yeah, it should stay that way, I think. Tell me if you think I'm wrong, but that white line is the bike lane, which we want to make sure we keep. Those 2 cars are illegally parked from the driving school, which is an ongoing problem for all of us. Yeah, I mean, it's really not great. So actually,
I found it confusing when you
yeah.
turn from Carlton in a vehicle. You assume that's a travel lane because of its width.
On the right side is a travel lane.
Yeah, on the left side it looks like a travel lane, and next thing you're looking at the fence.
Okay.
And then you scoot over quickly, and that can to a safety issue. So there should be some tapering so that it's obvious that it's
Okay. I'll look at that again. Okay. The next image shows the open space at 550 Vanderbilt. It is not open yet because we're finalizing some operational items for security. We expect in the next couple of weeks it will be open. It will have the same signs and the same rules as I showed you at 535. If you show the next image, there's a car parked here, which I just hate showing you this image because obviously there will not be cars parked in there ever. This is open space, but it wasn't open yet, so fortunately this photo was taken when there was a construction truck pulled up behind. I will point out, so you can see that there's these, sort of pavers, and then where that trash can is the beginning of just normal asphalt. As I showed you guys previously, because the construction next door will happen, there is no reason, we shouldn't do the nice pavers and plantings and everything because it will just get demolished. It's too close to that construction site. So this was this interim condition that I explained would happen, which is just asphalt. Okay, anyone want to talk about those before we move on? All right, so this is a photo of Atlantic Avenue looking north, looking towards Flatbush, showing the restoration of Atlantic Avenue and the median that we're very pleased is being added to the final condition. So I did say that this work we thought would be done, finished in November. It's pushed out a little bit to sort of late December now, unfortunately, just due to the usual construction conditions. But that work is actively going, and I know we're eagerly anticipating it being finished. In addition, the MPT on Atlantic Avenue near 6th is also scheduled to be removed you know, this winter, or hopefully December. So I did want to show you that image. Just want to make sure. So any questions people have about the conditions there that we should touch on before we move on? No? Okay. So the last photo I have for you before I turn it to Jane and the discussion of Times Plaza is actually in the rail yard. And I did want to talk about the West Portal tunnel access. Technically, the construction is now complete, so the next major scope of work is the track and switch installation connecting Atlantic Terminal to Atlantic Yards through the newly built West Portal. That new tunnel access track work within the tunnel will commence in early December. The tracks will connect the permanent yard that we've obviously been working on to the Atlantic Terminal, and it will be done over 2 consecutive weekends by the Long Island Railroad, and they've chosen the weekends of December 2nd and December 9th. And trains in and out of Atlantic Terminal will be suspended while the work is done, and work will commence late Friday night and go through early Monday morning. Long Island Railroad will obviously issue the notices to their commuters, but obviously it's a complicated shutdown, but it's necessary to activate all this work that's happened. And so we had to negotiate what weekends they wanted to get it done.
Ashley, what's the timing for the rail yard completion? I don't remember. Like the overall estimate?
It's always a tough to answer because complete, right? So we've shown you lots of pictures that we're building rail yards and portals while building structures to create a platform, to create buildings, etc. And so the idea that suddenly like nothing's happening there is when the park is open. So you know what I mean? I hate to use complete when it comes to the rail yard. So every time I have like a section of work in a place where I can say, you know, the West Portal access construction is complete and now it's just an operational turn on, I try to bring you that.
Okay, I don't know trains. So is this like a West Portal rail yard equals LIRR trains start running through here?
Well, remember the trains have always been running here. This is, you know, passengers never go into Atlantic Yards. They come in to get serviced and cleaned and hang out during the day and stuff like that. And so the West Portal is the connection under Atlantic Yards, under Atlantic Avenue, which has caused that very messy sort of MPT right past the arena. It is a hole that never existed before. The trains used to have to go all the way up through the East Portal on Vanderbilt and turn around and come back and back. So the answer to your question is no, but only because that's just not what we were ever doing. The tracks always worked. The yard has always been open since the day we started this. So it's not like suddenly some new access or some new use has been turned on, I guess, if I'm saying that right. Okay, any more questions for me? Otherwise, I'm going to turn over to Jane to talk you guys through the work we've been doing in Times Plaza, sort of in coordination and on behalf of the Department of Transportation, and of course in coordination with ESDC.
Are you staying though?
Yeah, I'm just going to. There's only one seat, so.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Jane Marshall. I'm from Forest City, and Times Plaza is one of the projects that Greenland Forest City is required to do in relation to this project. So I'm just going to give you an update of where we are. So if you go to the first slide, this shows Times Plaza is that tiny triangle surrounded by blue dots. But it happens to be at an extremely significant intersection because it's bounded by 3 heavily trafficked arterials, which are 4th Avenue, Flatbush Avenue, and Atlantic Avenue. The other salient point that I think you should understand up front is that Times Plaza eastern portion of it is owned by the MTA. And it has the old Atlantic Avenue subway station head house.
Jen, can you come a little close? Bring the mic closer to you.
And it is it's actually a skylight into the station below. So the east portion of Times Plaza belongs to the MTA. The western portion belongs to DOT. So we are required, and we are renovating the DOT portion of the Times Plaza, which is about 4,500 square feet. It's not a lot. As an off-site open space improvement, which is actually a term, per the 2014 SEIS. So it's really, we are almost acting as a client for DOT because it's a DOT-owned project. They are making the design decisions. They are managing the city approvals, and one of those is the Public Design Commission. And we have retained Stantec as the design firm, which was acceptable to DOT. We haven't done anything without DOT at the table. And geographically, what this shows is that it's in the center of a bunch of neighborhoods coming together, like the Cultural District, Barclays, Borum Hill, Park Slope. It is sort of in the center of things, and a lot of people use it to get to places. That's really what it's used for. And then this just shows you other public open space. So now I'll go to next. So if we zoom in, it's surrounded by retail and commercial uses, and it's on top of the subway station, which has 9 subway lines. And it's directly served by 2 buses on Flatbush Avenue going southbound. So if you see you can see the head house outlined, and then there's sort of a triangle outlined around the head house. That is the MTA property. That sort of gray line around it is the line of bollards. So the MTA site has the head house, and then has some paving, and then some steps, and then bollards. And that's sort of the DOT portion, as you can see, is sort of virgin territory. So this is the existing conditions. And I think, it says exactly what I was talking about. It's a unique, highly trafficked location. It's surrounded by 3 major arterials. There's a mix of pedestrian and vehicular and bus traffic, and there are 6 huge crosswalks, and it's transitional in nature and not a destination. So this is not a destination open space. It needs to be designed for what it should be used for, and public safety and other kinds of things are the aspects and parameters that influence the design decisions. So I think I say that too. So it's a New York DOT project, pedestrian traffic patterns, public safety issues, avoid conflicts with utilities, so I'm going to get that, avoid conflict with the MTA, really almost impossible, but we're going to try. Use DOT standard materials and fixtures, and use previously approved design and area precedents. So that relates to PDC, because anytime you use something that's different from what's been done before, it triggers a whole bunch of other conversations. The maintenance is going to be done by the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership. This is a lot that lies in the southern portion of the Metrotech bid. And then we considered the rank of in the hierarchy of open spaces. So, okay, so this is where we're showing the traffic and the pedestrian flow. And there is stuff behind this, but we've looked at these traffic patterns, and you can see that in the blue area, there are just a lot of people traversing. But along the MTA property, that's where the buses are. So people sit on the bollards, they sit on the stairs, they do, they're hanging out waiting for the bus. That's what really was going on. And our site, the DOT site, is in the blue. So I guess my major point is that a lot of people use this to get from point A to point B. So they use all those crosswalks. The next slide, this shows, it's complicated, you can't read that thing, but the next slide, this slide shows the utilities that are underground. So what do the utilities do? They impose limits on what kinds of designs you can put above grade, and they essentially preclude going below grade. And then you also have the jurisdictions of the agencies that have, opinions about what goes on top of their utilities. So DEP doesn't want anything in their sewers. There are a bunch of things that DOT is going to have to negotiate with city agencies to get the design approved. So the last slide is the conceptual design as it is now. It's progressed through several community meetings, and I think that Community Board 2, although I wasn't at that meeting, approved it in May of this year. Modifications were made over the past 2 years. I mean, we have been working on this since 2015 with DOT, figuring out the process, doing initial designs. So in response to public input, and in response to DOT's development of a pedestrian safety plan that affects the larger area. Basic components of the design haven't changed, but the curb, if you can see that sort of green shadow on 4th Avenue, that's actually the location of the curb, and DOT wants to push it to the west to provide for a future bike lane. And that's one of their safety and transition. They want ultimately to have something go down 4th Avenue. That's the goal.
I'll ride my bike there. Oh, yeah.
And then,
Real
yeah,
safe.
I don't know. It's still a little scary. And then there's a pedestrian refuge sort of bump out at the top, which is also not there now and wasn't in the design. So those things have been added to the design. And then the next step is for DOT to file the application at PDC, and that could happen like November or December. I've spent my life avoiding PDC, so I don't actually know how the process works. But if everything works, I'm told, possibly this project could go into construction the second quarter of next year. It's not going to be a lot of construction, and it probably takes 6 to 8 weeks in the end. But we have to get to construction drawings. We have to bid everything out. And then the next 2 slides show the materials and the sort of that we're using as part of the design. And then the plantings are the last things. And these things were all selected and shown. They were selected by DOT, and then they were shown to the community board. So, and now we have to see what PDC is going to say. But that's where we are.
Just go back to the slide of the design. Yeah, there. So is that portion that's going to be turned into a stretch of bike lane, does that connect to any other part of the bike network?
It's a future. They're calling it a placeholder for the future because they have work that they have to do on 4th Avenue to the south to really have a bike lane. So they're just holding that. I don't know how they're going to stripe it. I don't know when they're going to do it, but they're planning for a bike lane. And this was a huge issue in the community. They wanted a bike lane.
They want them. No, but
it doesn't connect to anything right now.
What's the nearest portion of the larger bike network?
Over in the
You go across the street, I think.
It's the northbound.
No, well, this is south.
This is, well, so, right, I was going to say, this section is one way, and 2 of the major bus routes turn left up Atlantic right here, right? Yeah,
Not left.
B45 turns left on 4th Avenue and
thought
goes
that
straight up Atlantic, and so does somebody else.
That, the question of where the crosswalk would be heading south on 4th Avenue. The 45 continues straight on Flatbush and continues to go straight.
No, the 45 goes down 4th and goes up Atlantic, and then
Right,
cuts up Washington.
Makes a left
It
turn.
makes a left turn there,
Okay.
where their bike lane is.
I am not
I know,
the
it's not
person
you.
who wants a bike lane here. I thought everyone was insane, but that's just me. So DOT and the community are asking our design to leave room and to push back 4 feet so that they can, in the future, have a bike lane. Now, if that never happens,
Again, I will not be riding my bike.
I won't be
Dangerous
either.
as hell.
So
Any other questions from board members? Jamie?
Thanks. So Jane, I see 6 trees. How does that, I mean, I know very little about the project, but I know there was a deficit of trees that were to be replanted on site. Do these trees?
No, they don't
add
count.
to that, or
No,
they don't count?
They're separate and above.
Oh.
There were never trees on this particular thing, and they can't be planted, so they're going to be the types in planters. But they definitely wanted trees, so the trees are a component. Fixed benches are a component on this side of the MTA, and also movable tables with umbrellas. And then for the Downtown Brooklyn Partnership, we set aside a location for a kiosk so that there could be potentially a kiosk. And then the planters, other planters along 4th Avenue to create a buffer are movable planters because they're right over the street. So there'll be a significant amount of grasses and things like that, and a bunch of trees, and then seating and movable tables and chairs, and potentially a concession. I'm sorry, I didn't go through the program. Thank you for asking.
Is that it? Any other questions from board members?
So I had a question for Ashley, though, so I don't know how we want to trade that off. So I just wanted to, sorry, let you take a seat. To understand and make sure that other board members know that, and my understanding might be wrong, so tell me if I'm wrong, is that there's a proposal right now to combine for tax purposes, the condo building at 550 Vanderbilt and the affordable housing building at 535 Carlton in order to qualify the condo building for an extended 421A tax exemption, now Affordable New York program.
Okay. So as you guys know, we've been watching the 421A and participating in it as sort of closely as possible, given that Pacific Park was treated as a special section in the now expired 421A law. It's called Section 13. So it describes a UDC large-scale plan by which the affordability across our site was counted instead of building by building. And so because we have such high affordability, 35% higher than even the new Affordable New York program requirements, we were able to count condos and market rate units across multiple buildings in our 421A program. That has been taken away from us. It was not kept in the law. And so in a changing landscape where there's now a new law, we sort of have looked at all the different options to say, hey, how could our buildings be treated in the future that aren't under construction? How are the buildings that exist, the ones we went through today, going to be treated under this? And in coordination with the city, are keeping 2 of the buildings under the old law, but because we don't get to 1,500 units, the way the Section 13 was written, you had to get to a certain number of units across affordability. We sort of looked at all different options and realized because of our zoning lot treatment, those 2 buildings, B11 and B14, can be treated combined to get 25-year abatement under the old law. So we're just applying like any other building under an existing law, under the regulations that exist. But that does mean, yes, that the zoning law, treatment of 2 buildings together do get us benefits for 25 years, whereas if we'd just been treated under Section 13, it would have been 15 years. In order to do so, we had to make B14 more affordable. So the benefit on the affordability side is there, switching some band 3 units to band 3 units, family-sized units. So that's a nice benefit. But in addition, another good benefit, depending on who you care about, is that B11 has 25-year abatement, we hope. I would say big caveat in all of this is that it hasn't been approved yet, but there is an application. In addition, I do want to point out that getting a benefit for condos ever again is something we had counted on and created a pro forma around and, created a whole building project around, and we no longer have that.
So I guess what happens with B12 and B13 in the middle? Like if we were, that technically means that there's two things on either side that are one lot and then two things in the middle that are two separate lots? Yeah.
I guess we don't know yet. Depends on what gets built. Yeah, exactly. So if you built 25, 75, affordable New York sort of standard operating procedure building, it would be treated alone. So, basically all our assumptions got thrown in the air, and we are working through building by building.
Is that it for questions from board members?
I have two further questions. I've been informed by a recipient of the window mitigation that she was asked to sign a non-disclosure and litigation agreement. Is that common practice? It's not something that we were aware
Roberta
of.
has an emergency today, so she's not here at last minute. So can I get back to you on that?
Yep.
She works day to day with the folks on the windows.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, there was a little unease around that, just uncertainty.
Okay.
The other question I have is in regards to the 17 households that were originally on the project site that were guaranteed affordable housing to come back.
Yep.
What is their status? Where are they? Do we have tabs on them?
Yeah. Just want to make sure I don't say the numbers wrong. So bear with me. So what Jamie's talking about, for those not as familiar, is that there were a number of households that were relocated off the site and agreements made with them to bring them back. 4 households have moved back to Pacific Park to date, and that leaves 11 more households to work through their housing. I think you said 17 to start? Yeah. So the reason my number is 15 and yours is 17 is 2 people we've come to private agreements with, and they're no longer working to come back to the site.
And do they have to go through lotteries, or how does that work?
Yes, they were through the lottery, and they can also go through this open marketing, and it's our goal, hopefully, that through B3 and B14, hopefully everyone gets back.
Okay, I want us to return to the public comment section portion of the meeting. Thank you. We'd like to invite individuals to share their comments. Generally, we'd like to limit those to 2 minutes. I'd also like to state that this is intended to be a question and answer session. And so anyone who'd like to make a comment, please do so. Toby, can you?
Sure. The 2 names I currently have for the public comment period is Mr. Peter Crashers.
2 names?
Well, Mr. Crashers and Mr. Vacone, but I don't know if you...
Yeah, so I will, thanks again, everybody. I'll try to be more succinct and organized than last time. So a couple things. Because some of this is going to cover quality of life issues, some of it more broad things, and there will be some questions, but I recognize that there's not necessarily going to be answers. Just an observation that also another thing that is regularly input to the during the quality of life meetings and elsewhere is that there's no street signage in a lot of areas. We've been working for quite some time, and this isn't a matter of years, not months, to get street signage put up properly. And that means that without parking regulations posted, you don't have any possibility for enforcement. This goes to the point that the project, if you aren't able to get this to function properly, then the project is failing for several generations before you finish building it. To the noise mitigation, this was a non-disclosure agreement, but also had to sign an agreement that you would not litigate from the beginning. I think I'm not exaggerating, from the beginning of time to the end of time. So I think I would hope that the state would provide an answer for why somebody who's receiving a noise mitigation that's required by the project is asked to sign this agreement. And I think maybe even looking at who provided it to them would be helpful. I don't think I heard, and I could be wrong, dates for when Atlantic Avenue would be opened in full. That date was, it seems to be a rolling forward number, and that's a very big deal. So I think it would be really helpful to get an answer to that. Likewise, the permanent rail yard is, to my recollection, supposed to be done at the end of this year, according to what's been said, at least in the state framework. Even if outside of that framework, there's been a 2018 date. It'd be really helpful to have you guys nail that down. And this goes to both the to this issue of the timing of the rail yard, but also to the Times Plaza, that having MTA at these meetings, which has been an ongoing request for 3 years, and MTA and ESD both report to the governor, would be extremely helpful. I would note that for Times Plaza, 6 local elected officials, I think 6, wrote a letter asking Department of Transportation, the state, and the developer to coordinate with MTA to improve Times Plaza, and that didn't happen. And so these are the kinds of things where actually, if this board says to Mr. Phillips and to others, get MTA here, and asks the governor to have MTA here, and explains that that will make a difference in terms of what's delivered to the public, then maybe the MTA will be here on a regular basis. And they used to be. Yeah, I think that's about it. I'm going to wrap it up. I just want to repeat, we really do have a problem with community-state relations, and we have a problem with how the state goes about monitoring and enforcing its agreements, and it's the expectation, basically what is being produced by the project is not what's supposed to be being produced by the project. That's a big problem.
Mr. Vacconi, representing, you don't miss PHNUC there.
I'm just here as a concerned citizen today, and in that regard, I have 3 things to say. The first one is, I'd like to thank all of the directors here at the Atlantic Arts Community Development Corporation for making time in your busy lives to participate in this body. What you do is very important to the community surrounding the Atlantic Arts Project, and as a member of that community, I wanted to express my appreciation to all of you. The second thing I wanted to say is I made a small misstatement in my last public comment where I described the previous construction fence on Dean Street during the staging of the arena as a chain link fence. In fact, it was an 8-foot construction fence, but it was only 8 feet tall. It was located at the lot line, not at the sidewalk, and certainly not in the middle of Dean Street. And I really hope to see pressure and encouragement continue to be put forth by this board for that fence to be brought back, since there is no justification for its current location. And the third thing I'd like to say is this. I'm glad to see that there is a list of project commitments that the board is tracking that recurs at these meetings. I'd like to propose something to be added to that list. I'd like to draw the director's attention to the requirement under the project agreements for parcels in the project that are not being used for development and have no prospect of being used for development in a 12-month period to be converted to temporary public open space. It was in November of last year the developers announced that they were not prepared to begin any new development at Atlantic Yards, that there was no date at which they might be ready to begin further development at Atlantic Yards. And with respect to the rail yards, to Ms. Williams' question, I think there is actually a contractual commitment to finish the permanent rail yard with the MTA. I don't know if I'm not sure whether that's, at one point it was 2017, I think it might be 2019 now, but it's, what?
30 more seconds.
All right, 30 more seconds. So it's a real date, and when that date comes and that rail yard is finished, and which could be within the next year or so, and if there's no plan to move forward with other construction, we have to look seriously at those lots on Block 1129. So I'd like to make sure that that's on the director's radar because, again, I think that date is coming soon, and that commitment should be enforced. Thank you very much.
I don't have any other speakers.
Thank you. There being no further comments, I want to thank the directors. and
Madam
everyone.
Chair.
I'm sorry.
Do we have a question?
Yeah.
Sorry.
And Marion, perhaps maybe you can guide me on how to ask this question. But I would like to ask so as a board member, I would like to propose that we ask that the fence be removed, the one on block 1129, that it be lowered, removed if there is to be no activity, and or temporary open space be provided as is required. So how do I make that as a formal request? Do I
You just did.
propose a motion and
No,
do
you
my
just
board
did.
members
So
second
let
it?
me say
Yeah.
this. You just did, and it's something that we've already started having conversations with the developer about 2-3 weeks ago. Lauren, our attorney on the project, did reach out to them and explaining that there is that requirement.
Right.
And I think we'll be prepared to give you a comment. Either we can do it electronically, or we can definitely have a conversation announcing what the plan is or what's going on in the next several weeks.
Thanks.
So stemming off of Mr. Bocconi's comments, I also want to just thank Toby for entertaining my additions to the agenda. There was one item that I think was actually on the President's report agenda but didn't get touched on, and that's the project mitigation matrix. So in a request to understand where the public commitments are at this stage of the project, I was informed by Toby that in HDR's quarterly reports, not the document that we received, but there's actually an appendix that is hard copied onto a CD disk drive, if you use those anymore. And at the very end of it is a matrix that HDR is responsible for putting together of where those public commitments are. I would like to reiterate my request that part of the HDR appendix, I believe you said it was 28 pages, is shared with the board and also placed on the ESD website.
So in the conversation we had with you on yesterday, I think we agreed that we would highlight the active items. We can always send to all the directors a CD of those appendix. And I said to you, I would need to speak to our webmaster in terms of the amount of content we're able to put on our website. This has nothing to do with AYCDC. This has everything to do with the fact that we have several items on our website. And when we were developing the new website, that is up. When we developed the new website, there was just so much content statewide and how much we can put on. So one, we will commit to, we did commit and we did present today, items that are active in those commitments that we will present and let you know where they are. Two, we will make sure that all of you who are interested, we'll make sure you have the CD-ROM, that you can see those items. And then three, we'll try to figure out the best way to do that publicly.
Is it not possible to just excerpt the mitigation matrix? Because that's like, I mean, I've gone through those and it's like.
Yeah, no.
Yeah, we can.
I will.
I'm saying yes to it. How she does it mechanically.
Okay.
That's why she's much smarter than me.
Thank you.
I'm not that.
And as for the why we didn't make that full announcement in there in the my presentation, it is in my notes.
It is.
Because she's going to chastise me later. It is in my notes, but somehow I could not see them because I'm not that smart
The
electronically.
iPad got the best.
There we go.
I understand.
Yes, that's what happened.
So can we next time around also get in, like, I'm a little confused now of does the rail yard have a final timeline or not? So can we also get an update on that? Because if so, I think it'd be good for us to all sort of know that there's an end date to it.
What Ashley was saying to you was that although there is an end date to it, there's still always going to be work in the rail yards putting up the platform. Okay. And that's what she was saying.
So then if
we can send you the I want to tell you what I know off the top of my head, but I don't want to be wrong.
Okay.
So we will email that. Toby will email out as the follow-up what that contractual end date is. Understanding that with that contractual end date does not necessarily mean there's not going to be any more work trying to put the platform up. And that's what I'm assuming that's what she was saying. Scott's assuring me that's what she was saying.
On B15, I know we don't quite have a timeline for when that's going to start yet, but I know I'm keeping it on my radar because this is the building that has the school, and I know we had a long conversation about security and some of the stuff that has already happened, and wanting to rethink that when we knew that the school was going to be coming online. I want to make sure we have that conversation before we get to 3 or 4 months out of the school actually getting ready to open, because I know that was a lot of thought of we're going to have an active construction site with an active school at the same point in time. at some point in time?
Well, in this case, B3 will be completed, and so there will not be an actual construction site adjacent to B15.
But B4 and B5 might be, right? So across the street on the other side might, and diagonal.
When we get closer to
Yeah.
So I mean,
yes.
it's further out.
Yes.
I know it's
Yeah.
further out. I just always leave it in my notes. And then, so I guess I also, for the rest of the directors, am raising the question of 421A. Ashley left, so I didn't get it. I mean, I appreciate her answering this, but I think one of the things that's being flagged for the city council members and some of the elected officials, which I'm their appointee, is this vastly changes the amount of tax revenue that these buildings will produce. So it changes the first year of taxes for the 550 condo building from like 1.5 million to like 150,000 in terms of what the entire building would generate for taxes. And then you extend that out over the life of a 25-year abatement versus a 15-year abatement. It has, I mean, I understand it has financial ramifications for the project, and that's sort of what Ashley's calculating and what Forest City is thinking about, but it also has financial ramifications for the community and the loss of tax revenue that the neighborhood gets, and then can think about what they can do in terms of infrastructure and education and park space and all those sort of things. So I think those are also things that are being discussed.
Any other comments from board members?
There was one other thing I wanted to respond to that Jamie asked, and this is why I can't scribble my notes. Yeah, that was new information for us in terms of people having to do non-disclosure. That's new. So we will look into that and follow up with the developer and get back to you quickly on that. That's rather it's news to us as well.
Hearing no further business, can I get a motion to adjourn? Thank you. All in favor?